There comes a moment in life when you look at yourself and realize you've been carrying a weight you never asked for, a heaviness that didn't originate with you, yet somehow ended up on your shoulders. You may not speak about it, but somewhere deep inside you know the truth. The person you became or the version of yourself you're terrified of becoming is shaped by the man who raised you, or the man who wasn't there. This isn't about blaming him. It is about acknowledging the quiet questions that arise when the noise fades. Why do I feel so small? Why do simple things feel so difficult? Why do I battle struggles no one else seems to notice? And those questions often lead back to your father. A father doesn't just raise a child, he shapes the voice inside them, the voice that whispers during doubt, the voice that speaks when you fail, the voice that appears when you hesitate, when you're scared, when you're trying to prove yourself. For some people, that voice is encouraging. For others, it's absent. For many, it's critical. Maybe your inner voice became one that holds you back instead of lifting you up, softening you instead of sharpening you. But this didn't happen because you are weak. It happened because you adapted. Children learn strength by watching their parents. If your father used silence, you learned to suppress your own voice. If he led with anger, you learned to tiptoe around emotions. If he expected perfection, you learned that nothing you do is ever enough. If he was inconsistent, you learned to overthink every move. If he disappeared, you learned to question your worth. These patterns weren't choices, they were survival instincts. You grew up reading his moods instead of understanding your own. And survival mode changes everything: your brain, your confidence, your view of what is safe. Now, in adulthood, the behaviors that once protected you are the same ones holding you back. Avoidance becomes fear of decision-making, self-doubt becomes your normal, staying quiet becomes your comfort zone, independence becomes isolation, shrinking becomes a habit you call personality. But what if these aren't really your patterns? What if they were passed down? Your relationship with your father became the template for how you treat yourself. If he dismissed your dreams, you learned not to trust them. If he rarely showed pride, you learned to chase validation. If he didn't understand emotions, you learned to bury yours. If he carried fears he never faced, you inherited the echoes. This doesn't make him a villain, it makes him human. He may have been shaped by the same patterns, the same fears, the same silence. Healing begins when you stop seeing yourself as flawed and start seeing where those flaws were taught. Awareness is the first kind of freedom. When you finally look at your father not as a symbol, but as a person with wounds, insecurities, fears, and missing pieces, you begin to understand how much of what you carry wasn't yours to begin with. And once you understand the origin of your patterns, you gain the power to change them. Change doesn't happen with one big transformation. It happens in small, honest moments. When you speak up instead of shrinking, when you rest without guilt, when you stand your ground calmly, when you ask for help without apologizing, when you stop replaying old conversations, when you allow yourself to feel instead of numbing, when you choose honesty over avoidance. These small choices build a new inner voice, a voice that finally sounds like you. Not the version shaped by fear or silence, but the version you were always meant to be. And slowly, the real you starts to emerge. The you who wants to take risks. The you who wants to breathe freely. The you who isn't afraid to feel. The you who doesn't chase approval. The you who lives from intention, not protection. Because here's the truth. You are not responsible for the emotional gaps your father carried. You are only responsible for what you choose to carry forward. You now have something he may never have had: awareness. And awareness gives you the power to break cycles, to heal, to grow. Real strength isn't hiding emotion. Real strength is understanding your past without letting it dictate your future. Real strength is choosing to evolve instead of repeat. Real strength is becoming someone your father never had the chance to become. One day, you'll look back and realize something profound. What you once called weakness was actually the beginning of your transformation. It was the signal that you were ready to step into a life beyond inherited limits. Your story continues with you, not with the patterns you were given, not with the weight you once carried, but with the strength you are discovering now. And maybe the most powerful truth of all is this: you were never weak because of your father. You only believed you were. Your strength, your real strength, is just beginning to unfold. If this message resonated with you, please consider sharing it. You never know who might need to hear it today. Thank you for watching.